The heavy brass teller window felt cold against my knuckles. The bank manager slid the printed ledger across the polished marble counter. He refused to make direct eye contact with me. The final balance line was printed in stark black ink. It read exactly $0.00. The disbursement date was listed as 14 days ago. My name is Silas Reed. I am 28 years old. I live in Chicago, Illinois. I work as a senior forensic financial auditor. This specific trust fund was established by my late grandfather. It contained exactly $65,842.15. It was legally designated for my first property down payment. My father was the primary custodial executor until my 28th birthday. He drained the entire account 2 weeks before my legal vesting date. I did not raise my voice at the nervous bank manager. I did not pound my fists against the teller glass. I simply analyzed the routing numbers on the final transfer receipt. What time was it when you realized a parent was actively stealing from you? Drop your city and the time in the comments below. The money was routed to an offshore holding company. The routing prefix indicated a regional bank in the Cayman Islands. My father claimed he was experiencing severe liquidity issues with his contracting business. He told me over a brief phone call that he borrowed the funds temporarily. He promised the principal amount was completely safe and generating interest. He assumed I was still the naive teenager who trusted his financial authority. He did not realize I spent the last 6 years tracing illicit corporate assets. I track missing capital for Fortune 500 companies. I uncover complex embezzlement schemes hidden behind layers of shell corporations. Finding stolen money is not just my profession. It is my specific and highly calibrated obsession. I folded the bank ledger into a perfect geometric square. I placed it inside my leather briefcase with deliberate precision. My resting pulse remained perfectly steady at 62 beats per minute. I thanked the manager and walked out into the freezing wind. I did not feel any profound sense of betrayal or traditional grief. I felt absolute clarity about my next operational steps. I pulled my coat tight against the bitter chill. The methodical hunt for my stolen capital was now authorized. The systematic financial drain began when I was still in university. My father ran a mid-sized residential construction firm. He constantly blurred the lines between personal and business capital. We call this the commingling of funds. It means he treated company money like his own personal wallet. Whenever his business faced sudden insolvency, he turned to me. He expected me to liquidate my meager savings to float his payroll. I blindly transferred exactly $4,200 during my sophomore year. He needed it to cover an emergency lumber shipment. He promised to repay me with a 10% premium. I never saw a single cent of that principal return. My mother actively facilitated this toxic financial environment. She functioned as his primary psychological enforcer. If I questioned his sudden need for my liquid assets, she deployed immense guilt. She would cry and say I was intentionally sabotaging the family legacy. She insisted that blood was a shared corporate enterprise. Any refusal to fund his mistakes was treated as treason. Between 2018 and 2023, I subsidized his failures. I paid his delinquent commercial property taxes twice. The first payment was $8,115. The second payment was precisely $9,400. I assumed my career as a forensic accountant would establish boundaries. I earn a base salary of $165,000. I mistakenly thought my independent wealth would finally shield me. Instead, it only amplified his aggressive sense of financial entitlement. He viewed my corporate success as a brand new line of credit. He stopped asking for small emergency loans for his construction sites. He began demanding heavy capital injections to cover his extravagant lifestyle. He bought a customized luxury pontoon boat for $32,000. He leased a new sports utility vehicle for my mother. He funded these vanity purchases by quietly shifting debt obligations. He wrongly assumed I would never run a full audit on his personal finances. He thought my professional skills were only reserved for my corporate clients. He severely underestimated my willingness to apply those exact skills at home. He believed he was an invisible operator moving money in the dark. He did not realize I possess night vision for hidden financial transactions. I can clearly see every single missing cent he desperately tries to hide from me today. 9. I returned to my downtown apartment at exactly 4:15 in the afternoon. I did not pace the floor or smash anything in anger. I simply opened my encrypted laptop and accessed the State Business Registry portal. For 5 years, I acted as the registered agent for his primary construction firm. A registered agent is the legal entity responsible for receiving official state and tax documents. I also held the master administrative keys to his enterprise bookkeeping software. He relied entirely on my silent labor to maintain his fragile corporate compliance. I clicked the withdrawal tab and formally resigned as his official registered agent. The state processing fee was exactly $35. I paid it using a secure virtual credit card and printed the confirmation receipt. Next, I targeted his corporate revolving line of credit at the regional bank. He assumed his business generated the $50,000 credit limit organically. He did not realize I was listed as the primary personal guarantor. A guarantor is legally responsible if the original borrower defaults on the loan. I drafted a formal revocation of guarantee letter using my corporate firm letterhead. I transmitted the document directly to the commercial lending officer via encrypted email. The bank would immediately freeze his available credit upon receiving the formal notice. His pending material purchases for 3 active construction sites would bounce by tomorrow morning. Then, I logged into the master dashboard of his cloud-based accounting software. I navigated to the user management directory and located his primary administrative profile. I demoted his access level from owner to restricted view-only status. He could no longer modify existing invoices or obscure his questionable cash withdrawals. This administrative lock prevented him from hastily destroying any digital evidence of his ongoing fraud. I downloaded the complete general ledger covering the past 72 months. The export file contained exactly 14,820 individual transactions. This raw data was the vital material required for my impending forensic reconstruction. Finally, I addressed the commercial surety bonds required for his municipal building permits. I was the silent indemnitor, underwriting his performance bonds for the local city council. An indemnitor promises to cover the financial losses if the contractor abandons the job. I contacted the insurance underwriter and formally withdrew my continuous indemnification pledge. The city would automatically suspend his active building permits within 48 hours. His entire commercial operation was built on the hidden foundation of my pristine credit. He mistook my quiet financial sponsorship for permanent and unconditional submission. I systematically pulled the structural pins from his fragile financial scaffolding one by one. I felt absolute mechanical satisfaction watching the digital connections sever completely. The separation was entirely silent and surgically precise from start to finish. I closed the laptop and prepared a simple dinner of grilled chicken and rice. Now my resting heart rate remained steady and my mind was beautifully clear. I knew the operational panic would begin precisely when the banks opened tomorrow. The primary assault began at exactly 8:14 the next morning. My encrypted phone recorded 11 missed calls in rapid succession. The caller identification displayed my father's mobile number. His panic manifested physically as rapid voicemails filling my secure digital inbox. I did not return a single call or acknowledge his desperate digital barrage. By 9:30, my apartment building concierge buzzed my internal intercom. He announced that my parents were demanding immediate entry in the main lobby. I authorized their access and watched them arrive on the hallway security feed. My father hammered his fists against my heavy steel door. He shouted that his commercial suppliers were rejecting his corporate credit cards. A local lumberyard denied his order for 32 sheets of plywood. He claimed my sudden administrative withdrawal was a petty and vindictive maneuver. My mother joined the assault and began crying loudly in the hallway. She wailed that I was intentionally destroying their carefully constructed social reputation. She said the city suspended his permits for the new municipal library project. They were facing immediate breach of contract penalties totaling $18,000. I stood quietly behind the door and observed their chaotic emotional breakdown. They were operating under the delusion that volume and tears could override logic. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door exactly 4 inches. I did not invite them inside my sterile and heavily secured living space. My father pushed against the doorframe with aggressive physical intimidation. He threatened to file a civil lawsuit against me for deliberate tortious interference. He claimed I had a moral obligation to maintain his failing commercial enterprise. My mother leaned forward and attempted to utilize weaponized parental guilt. She reminded me of the pediatric asthma treatments they funded when I was 7. She demanded I restore his banking access to honor my fundamental family duties. I looked directly at my father and maintained a flat vocal affect. I informed him his corporate credit was frozen because I revoked my personal guarantee. I explained that a forensic accountant does not underwrite a documented thief. The word thief caused his face to flush with immediate and profound rage. He raised his voice and pointed a trembling finger at my chest. He promised to legally obliterate my professional accounting license by claiming gross negligence. He said my firm would fire me when he reported my hostile actions. I listened to his desperate threats with complete analytical detachment. I informed them this conversation was currently being recorded by my security system. I stated that extortion was a state felony punishable by severe prison time. They stepped back from the doorframe in absolute stunned silence. The sudden realization of their total powerlessness finally began to crystallize. I closed the heavy steel door and engaged the deadbolt. The trap was perfectly set. I returned to my desk and opened a new file. It was time to track every penny of my stolen $65,000. I smiled very coldly now. I returned to my primary workstation to begin the forensic reconstruction. The raw data file contained exactly 14,820 individual transactions. I initiated an automated reconciliation script using Python data analysis libraries. I needed to isolate the specific pathway of my stolen $65,000. Finding hidden capital requires stripping away the artificial layers of corporate obfuscation. I focused entirely on outbound international wire transfers spanning the last 30 days. The general ledger revealed a highly suspicious transaction precisely 14 days ago. My father authorized a wire transfer for exactly $65,800. He attempted to disguise it as an equipment purchase for a commercial excavator. The memo line read, "Heavy Machinery Acquisition Contract Number 482. I cross-referenced this contract number against his active supplier database. The supplier simply did not exist within the established commercial network. The routing sequence utilized the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication Protocol. The specific SWIFT code directed the capital to a regional bank in the Cayman Islands. I accessed a global corporate registry database to identify the receiving entity. The account belonged to a limited liability company called Apex Holdings Limited. Apex Holdings is a classic shell corporation designed to mask ultimate beneficial ownership. I pulled the incorporation documents using an international corporate intelligence portal. The documents required a processing fee of exactly $215. The mandatory Know Your Customer banking regulations provided my final piece of evidence. The incorporation paperwork listed a solitary managing director for the offshore entity. The director was a woman named Sarah Jenkins, living in Boca Raton, Florida. Sarah Jenkins is my father's clandestine romantic partner of exactly 3 years. He used my property down payment to buy her a luxury beachfront condominium. He drained my trust fund to finance his secret secondary life. I extracted the digital wire transfer receipts and the offshore incorporation documents. I captured the signed deed for the Florida property, listing both their names. I compiled these undeniable financial records into a heavily encrypted portable document format. This digital dossier was completely bulletproof and ready for immediate legal deployment. It documented every single fraudulent step of his amateur embezzlement scheme. I formatted the evidence package to meet the strict evidentiary standards of a federal court. I printed 3 physical copies on heavy premium archival paper. I placed each dossier into a separate sealed manila envelope. The paper trail was absolutely conclusive and mathematically verified. He believed his offshore maneuvers were invisible to standard regulatory scrutiny. He failed to understand he raised a highly trained apex predator. My trap was now fully loaded with devastating financial ammunition. I placed the envelopes into my biometric briefcase and locked the mechanism. The psychological preparation for the false truce was complete. I sat back in my ergonomic leather chair. I checked my stainless steel chronometer immediately. The digital display read 10:42. My mind was an absolute fortress of logic. The quiet wait began. The false apology arrived at exactly 1:15 in the afternoon. My mother sent a calendar invitation for a neutral arbitration lunch. The location was the Oak Brook Country Club dining room. I accepted the invitation because I required them in a public venue for my final phase. I arrived at the club at exactly 12:30 the following day. I wore a tailored navy suit and carried my locked biometric briefcase. My parents were already seated at a prominent table near the large bay windows. They ordered a customized seafood tower, costing exactly $145. My father stood up and offered a tight smile, attempting to project paternal warmth. He pulled out my heavy oak chair to demonstrate false patriarchal benevolence. I sat down and immediately placed my briefcase on the empty chair beside me. My mother poured me a glass of sparkling water and touched my wrist gently. She stated that family conflicts were merely temporary misunderstandings requiring grace. She said my father was ready to offer a formal and highly generous compromise. My father pushed a stapled legal document across the crisp white tablecloth. He explained it was a standard promissory note and a liability waiver. He promised to repay my missing trust fund over a 72-month amortization schedule. In exchange, I would immediately reinstate his commercial banking guarantee and withdraw my resignation. He called it a mature business solution designed to protect our shared legacy. I evaluated their synchronized performance with absolute clinical detachment. Their dilated pupils revealed profound underlying terror regarding his frozen corporate assets. I calmly picked up the document and analyzed the specific legal terminology. The contract contained a broad exculpatory clause designed to shield him from criminal prosecution. It was poorly drafted and lacked a legally binding severability provision. Furthermore, the proposed interest rate of 2.5% was completely insulting. It failed to account for standard inflationary decay over the proposed 6-year term. Now I noted the absolute absence of any collateral securing the proposed repayment schedule. He essentially wanted me to finance his theft with an unsecured and highly toxic loan. I placed the document back on the table and aligned it perfectly with the edge. I informed them a forensic accountant does not sign amateur waivers with active corporate embezzlers. I stated clearly that his offshore accounts were no longer a hidden secret. The facade of familial warmth evaporated from their faces in exactly 3 seconds. My father slammed his fist onto the table and rattled the expensive silverware. He demanded I sign the transfer documents before he ruined my professional reputation permanently. He hissed that I owed him my entire existence and my current financial stability. Saw my mother grasped her necklace and gasped in manufactured horror at my blatant disrespect. I stood up from the table and adjusted my suit jacket with deliberate mechanical precision. I informed them the check for the extravagant seafood was entirely their responsibility. I walked away quietly. I arrived at the Municipal Planning Commission at exactly 2:14 in the afternoon. The City Council was reviewing my father's emergency appeal for his suspended building permits. He stood at the central mahogany podium, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He spoke into the microphone with deep and practiced authority. He blamed aggressive supply chain logistics for his recent commercial defaults. He assured the 6 council members his financial standing was completely pristine. I walked down the center aisle of the crowded public auditorium. My leather shoes made sharp, rhythmic sounds on the polished hardwood floor. I carried the 3 sealed manila envelopes containing the forensic financial dossiers. He stopped speaking mid-sentence when he saw me approach the front row. The council president tapped her wooden gavel and asked me to identify myself. I introduced myself as the former primary financial guarantor for his construction enterprise. I handed the 3 envelopes directly to the municipal recording secretary. I instructed her to distribute the documents to the sitting council members immediately. Have you ever watched a malignant narcissist lose their public mask in real time? Tell me exactly how their face looked in the comments section below. My father gripped the edges of the podium until his knuckles turned white. He demanded the council ignore my documents and order my immediate physical removal. I spoke directly into the public microphone reserved for open citizen comments. I informed the council that his enterprise was completely insolvent and highly toxic. I proved he embezzled $65,800 from my trust. I noted the funds were wired to Apex Holdings Limited in the Cayman Islands. The council president opened the dossier and examined the offshore incorporation documents. She adjusted her glasses and reviewed the Florida beachfront property deed. I explained how a commercial contractor hiding stolen capital offshore violates municipal ethics codes. A contractor engaged in active federal wire fraud cannot legally hold city permits. My mother sat in the front row, paralyzed by absolute public humiliation. She covered her face with her expensive silk scarf to hide her panic. My father abandoned the podium and lunged toward the citizen microphone. 2 armed municipal security officers intercepted him before he crossed the floor. He screamed that I was an ungrateful sociopath, destroying his 40-year legacy. He claimed the offshore account was a legitimate international tax mitigation strategy. The council president raised her hand and silenced his frantic verbal barrage entirely. She stated the evidence of criminal embezzlement was overwhelming and mathematically undeniable. She formally denied his permit appeal and permanently revoked his municipal vendor status. She instructed the city attorney to forward the financial dossier to the federal prosecutor. My father collapsed into a wooden chair as the security guards flanked him. The heavy silence in the auditorium felt incredibly thick and mathematically perfect. I turned around and walked back up the long center aisle. I did not look back at the total destruction of his artificial empire. The total systemic collapse of his commercial enterprise required exactly 48 hours. The municipal permit revocation triggered an immediate default cascade across his active projects. His primary commercial lenders initiated aggressive asset seizure protocols by Wednesday morning. They impounded his customized pontoon boat and his fleet of heavy construction vehicles. The bank officially froze his remaining operating accounts, pending a federal fraud investigation. He owed exactly $412,000 in unsecured commercial debt. My mother, attempted to salvage her fractured social reputation at the country club. She discovered her premium membership was unilaterally terminated by the board of directors. The board cited the public morality clause embedded in the original membership contract. She was physically escorted from the private tennis courts by club security personnel. The devastation extended far beyond their crumbling suburban social hierarchy. I anonymously mailed the Florida condominium deed directly to my mother. I included the wire transfer receipts linking the property to Sarah Jenkins. The subsequent domestic explosion shattered their 32-year marriage completely. My mother immediately filed for a highly aggressive and contested divorce. She demanded total liquidation of their remaining shared marital assets. However, those marital assets were already targeted by federal banking regulators. The United States Attorney issued a subpoena ducis tecum for his offshore records. A subpoena ducis tecum is a legal writ commanding the production of evidence. He faced 3 distinct counts of federal wire fraud and international money laundering. His secret partner in Florida panicked when the federal agents contacted her directly. Sarah Jenkins immediately agreed to a comprehensive immunity deal with the federal prosecutors. She surrendered the beachfront condominium to federal asset forfeiture to avoid prison time. My father lost his business and his marriage and his hidden tropical sanctuary. He moved into a cheap motel off the interstate costing $40 nightly. His commercial surety bond provider filed a secondary civil lawsuit to recover their absolute maximum liability threshold. This specific lawsuit demanded $150,000 in rapid punitive damages. His total financial collapse was a perfectly, mathematically flawless and beautifully orchestrated systemic event. I observed the cascading destruction of his artificial life with absolute emotional detachment. I sat in my secure apartment and analyzed the final corporate dissolution documents. The parasitic drain on my personal capital was permanently and legally severed. Every single fraudulent variable was methodically isolated and completely destroyed. I finalized the legal recovery of my stolen trust capital exactly 3 days ago. The federal court ordered full financial restitution from his liquidated commercial assets. I received a wire transfer for exactly $65,800. I deposited the recovered funds into a high-yield municipal bond portfolio. The bonds generate a guaranteed tax-free return of 5.2%. My heavily encrypted mobile phone remains absolutely silent throughout the entire work week. There are no frantic voicemails demanding rapid emergency cash injections for failing projects. There are no tearful text messages attempting to manipulate my deep filial loyalty. The systemic block I placed on their access is absolute and permanent. I view them now purely as obsolete liabilities on a balanced ledger. Have you ever successfully audited a toxic liability out of your personal life? Tell me about your absolute breaking point in the comments section below. A forensic accountant understands that a corrupted spreadsheet must be systematically purged. It is the only way to restore absolute mathematical integrity to the core system. I built my psychological defenses using those exact same strict auditing principles. I engineered a cognitive firewall capable of blocking intense external emotional manipulation. The sterile environment of absolute logic is not a void to be feared. It is a peaceful sanctuary where chaotic emotional variables simply cannot survive. I sit at my workstation and review my perfectly balanced financial statements. The numbers provide a comforting and entirely predictable structural rhythm to my days. My resting heart rate remains incredibly steady at 62 beats per minute. I am the sole architect of my quiet and beautifully calibrated reality. The mechanical system runs flawlessly now that the corrupt data is permanently erased.